Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And on this Easter Sunday morning, we resurrect the hope that is often dimmed through the work of Christ and in our lives, who we are made alive again. And hope, peace, joy, resurrected as we look to the world around us and see so many headlines that are so troubling. And when hope is dimmed, when peace seems unattainable, we have to remember that Christ is alive, and alive in Christ's people. People of faith will gather around the world on this Easter Sunday, and for our Orthodox friends and neighbors next Sunday to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. On this Easter Sunday, we have a special guest with us, Reverend Teodor B. Czabala, Jr., the pastor at the Sacred Heart Ukrainian Catholic Church in Johnson City. We welcome you to this time.
Thank you.
Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter to you. Indeed, he is risen.
Thank you. Well, the power of the resurrection in these, well, it's always been powerful, but especially in these days. How will your church celebrate Easter today?
Well, each year, we have the standard, almost a static celebrations that we do. We have the morning service, the removal of the shroud from the tomb, which is part of all of the Byzantine rite. Those who received their Christianity from Constantinople referred to as the Byzantine rite, whether it's Catholic or Orthodox. The tradition is you come in early in the morning. Some do it late at night when it's still dark, as we hear from the scripture as well. And we have a service. It's called in front of the tomb, where we have a short service and we remove the shroud that we have for the tomb. We place the shroud up on the altar, and then we go outside for a procession around the church 3 times, and then we have this beautiful service, which is the opening of the doors. And you sing Christ is risen, you sing various verses there, and the priest with the cross knocks on the door and opens the door like in the name of Christ.
Right.
He opens up the door to heaven. And then you grab the doors and you pull them open. Everyone's singing, Christ is risen, Christos voskres. And you walk in the church with the choir behind you, the people behind you, and you're holding a cross and you just, the church is, the shroud has been, the tomb has been taken away. While you're walking around, the guys go in there, hurry up, put everything away. The ladies put all the flowers away, so that when you walk into church, everything's placed where it should be, and you're just entering this beautiful church. Some of the older folks stay inside; they don't do the procession. But you enter the empty dinner table, the party place, that God always refers to. The wedding feast. You enter into it because now the doors are open because of Christ's resurrection.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Then you begin celebrating the service and the Matin service, and after Matins we have the liturgy of the Eucharist, and it's just a continual celebration, reminding everybody. It's like every other verse is always Christ is risen from the dead, conquering death by death, and to those in tombs he granted life. It's just a beautiful service, very moving service. I enjoy it a lot. It's one of the, it really lifts you up, no matter how tired you are from all the services of Holy Week.
Yeah.
By the time you get to Easter, that morning service, it just lifts you up. It just gives you the strength to keep on going. And then when you greet each person at the end of the liturgy, when they're coming up for the anointing, Mirovania, it's just, greet each person with Christos voskres, and they respond, Christ is risen, indeed he is risen. Just the proclamation of that as a Christian is just it's so integral. We need to be remembered of that, especially now with all the stuff that's happening in the world. Because no matter what's happening in the world, that will never be changed.
Yeah.
That can never be changed, because it's independent, it's beyond anything, all the evil that's in the world. And it sort of reminds us that the Lord came into the world to conquer the evil. We have to start off with ourselves first. And that's where we start. We start off with the individual. Each one of us has to conquer the evil in himself. which is there, you know, and then you have to become a better person. And this is sort of reminding of that. And just the joy, you see the smiles on everyone's faces. And the service is so much more intricate. As a Christian, you know, that was the very first development of a feast day for all Christianity back in the 2nd century. You know, the idea of what our meaning of faith is. It was the resurrection.
Yeah. Do you strip the sanctuary on Maundy Thursday and Good Friday? Do you strip away all the decorations and so on, and then on Easter morning it's all put back?
Not really. What we do is usually we have a service which is now on Thursday night, which is reading of, it's called the Matins, even though it's in the evening. We celebrate it in our tradition, which is the reading of the Passion Gospels, which is reading of the Passion of Christ from all the 4 Gospels, 12 Gospels. They read each part of it. You read how each Gospel, each evangelist writes about the death of Christ. And then after that, usually that's when the guys get together. They put the shroud, they put the tomb together. The ladies put the flowers out around the tomb, and that's sort of like the preparation for that. But the rest of the week is sort of just as it was from the beginning of Lent. Then everything. Once a Friday for the Vespers, when we have the placement of the shroud, that's also very well attended. In our rite, along with Easter, that is the most popular celebration. Liturgical celebration that we have in our rite, because you put the shroud out, you carry the shroud around the church 3 times, and then everybody comes up on their knees to the shroud and they venerate the shroud. And it's a reminder to us of the fact that the Lord laid in the tomb for 3 days, was killed on the cross, and was laid out. And people after that, a lot of churches, also Byzantine churches, they would have like guard duty, sort of, where it depends on half hours, 15 minutes. People would come in and they would be able to stay with the shroud in the church, darkened church, all night if they want. It would be in hour intervals.
So that's like an Easter vigil.
Yeah, it's like the vigil starts on Friday, and then some churches, I remember when I was younger, it would go all night, all the way till Sunday morning, to Easter morning. You have guys coming in, kids, we had different various groups would be there throughout the day. But it was just something to sort of remind yourself of the vigil of standing by the tomb and watching and waiting for the moment of the resurrection. It's just so much. And then on Sunday morning, when they used to do it, I remember when I was growing up in New Haven, that while we were walking around, while the whole parish was walking around the church, the guys were quickly taking apart the tomb, the ladies were setting everything up in there, and you put all the flowers up and everything, all the dark, the purple, the red that was in the church was removed and was replaced with the white. Right. And it was just, you walk into that brightly lit church, into that bright area, and it just changes your whole mood for that day.
This is the everlasting light, the resurrection light. The symbolism is powerful.
Yeah.
I had never, Presbyterians don't do ordinarily an Easter vigil, but I participated in one where our conference center down in Montreat, North Carolina, did a vigil. Ran about 4 hours long, and it was the whole history of salvation. Yeah. So it starts with Genesis, moves us all the way through, and then leaves us right there at Good Friday. And then the next service that we had, of course, was an Easter service. This is in the middle of summer when we're recreating all of these liturgical elements, but very exciting and very powerful. It's drama. Yeah. It's the cosmic drama of Easter that we're trying our best to symbolize for one another in our various traditions. So tell me, the invasion of the Ukraine almost coincides with Lent. And how Easter will be different now for your congregation.
Oh, wow. Well, it affects us because obviously we have, some people do have, some of our parishioners do still have family member, although our parishioners tend to be more from the western part of Ukraine. But that doesn't mitigate the pain that people feel because a lot of the young men were the ones who are from the western Ukraine would be going off to fight and defend the eastern part of Ukraine. So there's a lot of pain in that sense. How is it going to affect Easter? I guess it affects each person individually. It's not going to be something that's going to be easy, but it's also, again, a reflection of the fact that we have to recognize there are things that can never be touched, that can never be affected, because it's beyond what happens in the world. Easter is always Easter, and that's going to be, they celebrate Easter in the world wars, they celebrate Easter during Vietnam and all these other conflicts that have happened through the Christian world, because Easter is something that will always continue. Yeah. Unfortunately, you will always have death in the world, because that's just the way the world works. But how do we react to that? And of course it is going to be difficult. It won't be as joyous as it was in the previous years. It'll probably be slightly mitigated, but it'll still be, it'll still be Easter. It will still be singing, maybe because they were talking about, the whole the idea of going through the history of salvation. It's designed to bring you up. It's designed to bring you joy. The melodies, the constant singing, the constant reminder that Christ has risen from the dead, conquering death by death, and to those in the tombs he granted life. And just by saying that all the time, you're sort of reinforcing for yourself, I don't have anything to fear from this world, because what happens here is not permanent to me. It seems permanent to us. And I guess that's the people, as Paul says, in First Thessalonians, those who have no faith are the ones who have no hope. But those who have faith, those who believe in Jesus as the resurrection, we're not worried about death. We shouldn't be worried about death, because we recognize that we have something to look forward to. That wedding feast, that joyous celebration with the Lord in heaven. That's really what we look forward to. Now, obviously, everything else mitigates. As you see, people will have family members, loved ones that have passed away. That changes. Mothers that used to prepare all the Easter breakfasts. Fathers that would be there starting the prayers. Family members, brothers, sisters that will be there. You have joys. You're missing them for that year.
There's an empty seat at the table.
There's an empty seat at the table. So obviously that is not as happy as you would like it to be. But as one of my parishioners said, God rest her soul already, she goes, Father, I've seen so much loss in my life. Many people have died. So this is just an understanding of what, and she was a very pious lady, a very pious lady. And she said, I understand that this is just part of life. And she never let it affect her in that sense where it brought her down, because she had her faith, understanding that she's going to see all of her husband, her siblings, her parents, when the time comes, and she's going to leave this earth. And then she left in a very Christian manner, in that sense. And so Easter is going to have that dual function. To get to Easter morning, he had to go through Good Friday. To get to the resurrection, he had to die first. And the sorrow and the pain, because we remember that nobody expected him to resurrect from the dead. And we now, 2,000 years later, know that. But as they were going through it, living it, they thought he was dead. That's it. He's gone. He's not going to come back. And all of a sudden, they were so shocked and surprised. We see that shock and surprise when the women went there. The myrrh bearers. They said, he's gone. Where'd he go? They took his body. They didn't expect him to be the resurrect from the dead. So it just sort of should reinforce for us the idea of there's so much to life. But in the end, there's one thing that we look forward to.
When you mentioned surprise, it reminded me of a radio program I did many years ago. It was a half-hour syndicated rock music special called The Ultimate Surprise. And it was a look at Easter as something that it was a cosmic surprise to all of civilization. I mean, and it is something we as Christians have in common. The four Gospels tell four different stories that don't quite match, but that says to me there's great veracity in the way we see things. And then we share this. We may not have it on the same Sunday because some of our Orthodox friends will have it next week. But it is something we hold in common. For all of our differences, there is still that unifying sense of hope and everlasting light that moves us forward no matter what has held us back. Now, when you were growing up, what was Easter like for you? When did the ultimate surprise strike you as a younger person?
I guess it would already be probably, the ultimate surprise was really when communism fell, when the Soviet Union fell apart. Because we were raised as kids to celebrate Ukrainian Independence Day, which was January 21st. That was when Ukraine was independent before communism. Then the communists came. And then most of the people where I grew up, they were people who fled communism to save their lives. So they left everything behind.
Yeah.
So for them, that was they always looked forward and hoped for the day that Ukraine would be free of communism. It would be free of the yoke of another people telling them what to do and how to live and how to believe. And then all of a sudden, it happens. And it happens in a certain sense without a shot. Unfortunately, we see that now they have to fight for their freedom. But back then, it was just basically overnight. Totally unexpected, totally unanticipated. You had the putsch against Gorbachev, but it was, nobody really knew what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, boom, Ukraine is independent.
Right.
Ukraine is free. And you see all these people who spent their entire lives praying for this, receiving this gift, receiving this great thing. And so that year I think really was the most unique year of that I think for any Ukrainian, that really was a very touching year, a very moving year.
And I don't want to push the metaphor, but that was a resurrection also.
It was.
Yeah.
One of our greatest leaders, religious leaders, Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, he was the head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church from 1901 to 1940, I'll get to 44, I think it was. And when or after the war, 46, when he was dying, his deathbed statement was, Ukraine is, he goes, my children, you will go through much suffering, but you will come out of it stronger.
Right.
But this is the last time you hear my voice until the final judgment, and then he expires, and we have that on some of the cards that are written with his photograph on it, and it just reminds you that this is the idea of resurrection, of coming out. Here they were. So many people couldn't believe, weren't allowed to project their faith, to profess their faith, and all of a sudden they can. And it was an explosion in Ukraine, people going to churches and faith and just re-exploring what it means to be Christian.
Yeah. Where were you in your life? How old were you when this took place?
Let's see, I think I was just college.
Yeah.
I was in college when I came on. Then I ended up going. I went to study in Rome, and so we actually when we were in Rome, the first wave of students from Ukraine came over, so we get to meet the real Ukrainians, as the guys from Ukraine refer to them.
Yeah.
And it was just so interesting to hear that and to see that. It was just something interesting, different.
Our guest today on Encounter is Reverend Teodor Czabala Jr., who is also more affectionately known as Father Ted, and he is the pastor at Sacred Heart Ukrainian Catholic Church. And on this Easter Sunday, he is our guest today. Speaking of the resurrection, when the wall falls and the Soviet Union breaks up and Ukraine is once again independent, we're looking forward to that resurrection again. As I look at the destruction in the cities in Ukraine, the idea of resurrection seems almost impossible. It's the destruction is so complete in so many of these cities, but you have to believe they will rise again.
Yeah, I agree with you. You have to believe it. And I think the human will is indomitable, and dedication to rebuilding will always be there, but it doesn't make it any easier. I'm sure that after, I was actually standing at the altar when 9/11 happened. I remember I was just in the middle of service, and my friend comes running off to the side altar and says, America's under attack. I'm like, what are you talking about, America's under attack? Then you see, and I was watching the buildings crumble, and now after that, we see that there's a new building standing in its place. I guess that sort of just reminds us that you see Mariupol, you see these villages, you see these cities that have been completely demolished, destroyed. And they're going to have to be rebuilt, and they will be rebuilt. because if people want to go back, we'll rebuild them. They will have that dedication to rebuild them. And it will stand as a new monument to the the dedication, I guess, of the people to a future. Yeah. Because there always will be a future.
Well, and the television interviews that we see with people expressing such courage and such determination, even the elderly whom they interview will say, we will not die. We will not roll over and give in. There is such profound inner strength that so many folks are showing, despite the destruction of property, but even more importantly, the overwhelming numbers of people who've died in these attacks. But you know, again, we can't let this bring us down, because once again, that resurrection light shines on all of this, and as you say, the world is still in great turmoil, but there is still this light that shines from this open tomb, which is what we're celebrating today. We have in our church a cross that's had a purple shroud on it through Lent, and now that's taken down, and we will flower the cross today. People will bring in flowers and make it shine with all the colors and aromas of life. And throughout most of the churches in our community, Christ is risen. They'll be singing these songs, and boy, isn't music a powerful thing?
It is.
It sounds like it is in your church.
It is. Oh, very much. We're all a cappella, like a lot of the churches were originally, you know, because it's hard to get musical instruments. But the fact is that the power of the human voice, you know, not only are we uplifted by music, but by you singing it, it brings it out more alive to you. Yes. And you mentioned the cross. It's interesting because we have a cross that I've started doing too. A cross with the cross between the crucifix and the cross. This crucifix has the body on it, the corpus. But we have this cross with a body on it that I also put a purple shroud on. And for Easter, the body's removable. So I remove the body and just place a white cloth over the hanging on the cross. Yes. So it's also emblematic of the resurrection. The cross is now empty. Yeah. The body is no longer there. And that again is sort of the visual aspect of it. Yeah. We are very people are we use all of our senses. And the church the faith has always been a use of all of our senses. You know, the singing is not only our hearing, but also our acting. The visual is the different symbols we use, the flowers, the flowering cross that you mentioned, the empty cross, the corpus is removed. It's no longer there. You know, it has a different symbol now. Yeah. All these things are there to remind us of the fact that you're going back to Ukraine, as you mentioned, the fact that this will not be the end. Yeah. There will be something more that comes from this. Yeah. And Ukrainians, unfortunately, throughout the centuries have been, I don't want to say used to, but have understood that they've always been sort of the center, the gateway into Europe. And a lot of people have always been going through Ukraine, the other way from 1,000 years ago, when the Mongols were invading Europe. They were weakened a lot by Ukraine, going through this massive country, which was Ukraine, and all the strong city-states that were there, on their way into Europe. You know, and it was just part of the, and they've gotten used to it. And then when the communists came in, and then even before the communists, when Eastern Ukraine was taken by Catherine, I don't want to call her the great, I call her the terrible, just like Ivan, because of the terrible things that she did. You know, one of the first things they do, they destroyed the churches, you know, to sort of control the people. You know, and yet the churches, the faith has always been resurrected. No matter every time it seems that it's impossible, that nothing can come out of this. Communism for so long. And it happened just at the point where all of these older folks that were children when communism came in still remember the faith, and then they come out and say, this is who we are, this is our faith, this is our church, and this is how we express it. And they were still there to teach the next generation, because you see, where there's no faith, there's no life that exists. In Ukraine, I'll give you another example, pardon me, about the they did it when I was still there, so you're talking about almost 20 years ago. They did a exploration of the faith, where the church is strong, and social life in Ukraine. And they saw there was a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug addiction in the parts of Ukraine that were heavily under communism, where there was no faith, no church. And then the parts that had a very strong church, a very strong faith contingent, they had the lowest percentages of alcoholism and of drug addiction and of suicide and all the other things that are deadly, that are self-destructive to people, because there was an outlet for that. There was a place to be healed, a place to look for an understanding of who I am. And even here, going back to where we live now in the U.S., if people reject faith, you reject who you are. Because a faith is an affirmation of you as a person. You are a child of God. God loves you for who you are, not to change who you are, but to be the better person that you are, that He created you to be.
Yeah, that healing process is the way to life, new life. No matter the illness from which we're being healed or made new, healing and wholeness are a part of the faith which is alive. I want to mention too that when we talk about the Sacred Heart Ukrainian Catholic Church, we're talking about the church on the hill, the wooden church, which is so beautifully done architecturally. And I've been inside the church. We did that architectural tour a couple of years ago, and it's a magnificent place that I encourage you to visit, and certainly Easter will be a joyful celebration for all of your folks. Young people, are they learning the songs and learning the traditions?
I guess like with every culture, it's always, you try to make them appreciate it before, so they understand it.
Before they play soccer.
Right. Well, but not only before they play soccer and football and everything else that unfortunately we started doing on Sunday mornings, which I don't understand how that happened, but I was away when that happened. But the thing is, the fact that, as we get older, we're like, oh, wow, now I appreciate it. Now I understand it. Now it makes sense to me more, because you have more of life to judge it by. You may have a family, you may have a spouse, children, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, now all this makes sense. When you're younger, you may not always appreciate everything that you have around you because you take it for granted. Hopefully, we as parents teach our children to understand and appreciate it while they can, so that when they get older, it's much more alive for them. And again, we go turn back. If you reject it, then who are you? What are you?
Right. Thank you so much for taking time to join us for this Easter celebration on Encounter.
It was a pleasure.
It's a very busy time for all clergy, and we're grateful for your presence today.
Thank you.
Reverend Teodor Czabala, Jr., the pastor at the Sacred Heart Ukrainian Catholic Church in Johnson City, the wooden church on the hill. I'm Jeff Kellam, the parish associate at Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott, hoping that in the coming week you will be gentle with people and with yourself, and that you'll remember the joy of Easter is light that never goes out, the everlasting light that shines in people as we work out our courage, our compassion, and our convictions. Peace be with you. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed.